Welcome to the Regenaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Griggs. I'm host of the Regenaissance Podcast. Alongside me today is Mark McAfee of Raw Farms. Thank you for joining.
I'm glad to be with you. It's been a year. Wow.
Yes, so for the listeners, I've actually had Mark on almost a year ago today. If you want to check that out, it's episode 21. That goes more into the backstory. But I wanted to bring you back on today because I talk about raw milk a lot. I have, the tagline Raw is Law shirts, and online I actively follow raw milk news pretty much daily. And the one thing I noticed all the time is that, especially with you, and that's why I'm grateful that when I text you, because whenever there's one little instance, there's a million articles all of a sudden, and it's just the media just attacks like crazy, and I hardly ever see any positive articles. And it's funny because once again, there's one little thing that might have happened, and then all of a sudden there's a million articles, but then if there's anything good, you don't see anything. And so with you, I know you just had this instance to where you were in quarantine for, I believe, 6 weeks, and
Yes.
we just love to just hear your story on what has been going on, because I want the listeners to really understand too that, this stuff, the media really attacks, and it's really disruptive on all fronts, and it's not fair. And so, I would just love to hear what your side.
Well, remember that raw milk is regulated on a state-by-state basis. There's no federal raw milk laws at this point for human consumption. All the laws at the federal level are for pasteurization. So there's a tremendous amount of jealousy, market jealousy, industry jealousy, FDA jealousy, and protectionism about their kind of raw milk, which is the raw milk that gets pasteurized. That's not the raw milk we're talking about. We're talking about raw milk that's farmed, consumer connected, with great standards, state by state, and farmer training and testing. Whole different world. Never commingled between two dairies, all one dairy, one farm brand, extremely rigorous food safety. And that dialogue is really striking fear into the 100 years of pasteurization, because consumers are rejecting pasteurized milk 2 to 5% per year, depending on what market data you're looking at. And they're accepting raw milk and embracing it, loving it, and encouraging others to follow them. And there's an interesting phenomenon going on where some of the influencers are saying, hey, listen, if the FDA says to do it, I'm doing the opposite because they lied to me so much. And we don't lie to people. We tell the truth as a farmer. And so the consumers we have are just absolutely loving what we're doing, how we're doing it, and the delicious, probiotic, biodiverse, bioactives is a very important scientific term, raw milk, which is delicious. And it goes about doing all kinds of wonderful things like improving your immune system, your gut microbiome, fewer allergies, less asthma, fewer ear infections, fewer colds, fewer flu. All those studies are found in Europe. Interesting to note that the FDA always denies that those studies exist, even though they're on their archives at the NIH, CDC, and the FDA, PubMed. So they're lying to the public, and I'm not. I'm just exposing the truth and doing my very, very best to be an educator, a leader, pioneer in terms of helping other farmers produce raw milk that's wholesome and good and safe, so that consumers everywhere can enjoy this. So there's a big movement right now, and it's very, very disruptive to the current paradigm, which doesn't want to see it coming on.
It's very disruptive, and it's been really interesting, even just from my personal circle, of how many people have started drinking raw milk, and then just hearing just their experiences overall, and then also online, because I'm constantly asking people if they drink raw milk and just hearing their stories. And again, yesterday I made a post, and a guy mentioned that he started drinking raw milk a year and a half ago, and he drinks it daily now. So I guess just wanting to go back to with the past essentially month and a half with what's happened with you and Raw Farm, if you could just, I guess, explain just what has been happening.
Well, there's this whole bird flu thing going on. It started in Texas. And it's interesting that Texas has not done very much testing or anything. They just let Mother Nature take its course, and they're doing great. They're doing fine. The cows all have herd immunity. There's been no recorded illnesses of any kind associated with H. pie cows and raw milk. That's because the science says that humans cannot get a virus through their gastrointestinal tract. It is not a norovirus, which is different. This is the influenza virus. It's a respiratory virus. And last time I checked, you don't breathe in raw milk. You drink it. So you don't put raw milk deep into your lungs. You drink it into your stomach. And there's not one case anywhere in all time history of H. pie or H5N1 bird flu causing illness through raw milk in humans. None. Zero. Zip. There's been about 60 or so agricultural employees, farm workers that work on dairies that have had some pink eye, little conjunctivitis from actually dealing directly with the cows and their mucus that comes through their nose. There's a treatment protocol used to take care of these cows. Some of them get kind of sick. They recover in about a week or two, but during that acute phase of illness, they lose milk production. They get very dehydrated. They don't want to get up and drink water or eat. And so what the farmer does, he puts a hose down their stomach and gives them a 5-gallon flush of water and some aspirin, some probiotics, and they do really well. Within 24 hours, they recover and they're back on feed, doing good, and then they recover normally within 7 to 10 days. Well, when the farm worker does that, some of that mucus from the cow's nose might get in their eyes. And when that happens, they become inoculated with H5N1, and what do you know? They become immune, and they don't get sick. It's a very mild case of pink eye, which is conjunctivitis, and they recover within 4 or 5 days. So there is a major national USDA, FDA beating the drums about this horrible H. pie, when in fact, there's no basis for it. There really is no basis for it. On November 27th, we were shut down because it was our turn. Our cows came down with H. pie, with a highly pathogenic avian influenza, or H5N1. And they recovered within a few weeks. But it's been going all through California. There's 1,000 dairies in California. About 700 of them have become infected, and about 100 have already fully recovered. Our dairy has fully recovered. We have 3 dairies. One's not in the H. pie area, way northern California. The other 2, one's had its quarantine lifted. The other one will have its quarantine lifted in the coming weeks. But the bottom line is, the quarantine is extremely discriminatory against raw milk dairies. You're shut down completely. You have to sell all of your milk to be pasteurized. You cannot take any milk to your creamery and use it for human consumption. And the studies are really interesting about this. Within 2 days of the milk leaving the cow, even in a worst case scenario, 99.9% of the virus is inactivated and non-viable, cannot cause infection. Just naturally, the bioactives found in raw milk inactivate those viruses. But they're not using the test to test for that. They're using what's called PCR. And PCR tests for the genetic material that lingers in the milk for months. So instead of testing to see if we have viable virus in the milk, which doesn't cause illness anyway, but they didn't test for that, they tested for PCR, which is a highly biased, discriminatory practice, because that science doesn't tell you whether you have viable virus or not. It tells you whether genetic fragments of dead virus are present. So we're being discriminated against big time, and there's no human illness component. So it's a double whammy. And I feel that this is just simply the latest platform that the USDA, mostly the FDA, is using to just beat up on raw milk any way they can. You'll notice that the headlines will say, H. pie cases found in California. Yeah, dairy cows. And then it'll go on to say, yeah, no human illnesses found. And then they'll go on for 2 pages about how terrible raw milk is because of all the pathogens not related to H. pie. Although we test for all those pathogens, we control for them, and they haven't been a problem at all, they talk about them. So you know that this is a platform to just beat raw milk up any way and any opportunity possible. But our consumers see that. And they want more raw milk than ever because they see the lies being perpetuated. They see through that. The wolf has barked and cried wolf too many times, and now the FDA cannot be trusted. Excuse me, and the consumers are now saying we're going to trust our farmer, not the FDA, and consumers are buying more raw milk than ever. Our quarantine was lifted about 2.5 weeks ago here on one of our dairies, and we have not been able to catch up with demand. All-time record sales because consumers are just freaking out because they can't drink pasteurized milk. They have problems with pasteurized milk. It makes them allergic. It doesn't taste very good, causes gas pains. Even diarrhea has been reported to us from people that drink pasteurized milk. But raw milk makes them feel good, it's delicious, and doesn't cause those gastrointestinal upsets at all.
Yeah, with that too, I've just noticed just friends reaching out to again where to buy raw milk. I get comments all the time online for just raw milk maps. So it's really cool to see. I mean, even just since we talked last year, how much more it's grown. And like you were saying, how people have really just gotten fed up. I mean, the election just switched 2 days ago. And so that was a pretty awakening moment too, because there were so many people that made the vote for Trump purely for reasons of making America healthy again, talking about all of the different aspects of agriculture, but then RFK talks about raw milk a lot. And so I guess that could be a good segue into the next 4 years. I guess going into all of this, I know you just got out of the quarantine and it's really awesome to hear about the record sales. How do you feel going into these next 4 years from your perspective? Because it also makes sense that why you're so heavily targeted because you're the largest raw dairy in America. So yeah, I'd just love to hear your perspective on that.
I I have mixed feelings going in the next 4 years. I think this was an opportunity to really do some very, very constructive things with RFK. RFK and I are very, very aligned. In fact, he's asked me to be an advisor to the FDA on raw milk policy and standards. And so we'll see after RFK is confirmed how that all comes to pass. He still has confirmation hearings with Congress here in the next week or two. But he's already asked me, and I've already gone through background checks, and I've submitted the vision for America for raw milk, which is really powerful. And it will help the gut microbiome, which is 80% of the immune system, which is in shambles in America. So we could really make America healthier for sure if we can do that. But I have mixed feelings because I do not stand with Trump on the deportation of the people who work hardest in our country. I do not stand with that policy of closing our borders to people that are refugees and are work the hardest in America. So, like I said, I have mixed feelings, but I want to center myself on being constructive and serving humanity for the long term, for the next 100 years. So I want to take advantage of this opportunity that RFK is providing to all of America, which I think is sound, focused, and on point, and really, really needed desperately to be constructive to help America become healthier and help farmers too help America become healthier through the gut microbiome and raw milk, which is safe. So I think we have great promise going forward here under RFK and the FDA for sure.
Would you be able to share that vision that you have then?
Sure. I think what we're going to do is we're going to have to refocus the FDA at the federal level. Now remember that raw milk rights are at the state level, not the federal level. But if we can get harmonization, we can get an alignment between the feds and the states, then we can get a more uniform support of raw milk across the United States. Because right now we have 50 different states, and 50 different states are chaos. And it's intentionally that way. But if we can have the FDA come out with really clear policy and standards, and I would suggest that it would be done through what's called the RMO, the Raw Milk Ordinance. Right now, there's no raw milk ordinance. We have the pasteurized milk ordinance. So there would be the PMO, the pasteurized milk ordinance, and the RMO, the raw milk ordinance. And they would sit next to each other at the FDA. And under the RMO, we would edit all of the FDA stating about raw milk, and we put in all of the European studies showing how good it is for your gut microbiome and all the things we talked about, asthma, allergies, ear infections, cold, which are all the things that make America healthy. But they're not drugs. Those are foods. And we would modify the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to be food is medicine, not more drugs is medicine. So you have to have an alignment of the education so consumers can even understand. Because we don't sell raw milk, we teach it. We would establish very, very good world-class human-grade raw milk standards for farmers so that the states that do want to adopt the RMO, like they did the PMO, could say, this is the way we're going to do raw milk to make it really world-class. High standards. And we're going to have farmer training. So we'll have a lot of work to say, okay, if you want to do raw milk, great. But you as a farmer need to be certified. So you know what you're doing and how you're doing it. And there'll be continuing education to be able to always be on the leading edge of the technology and the environment and understanding how to do raw milk right. Then testing. And I believe in autonomous on-farm testing. Autonomous means independent. It means being able to do it by yourself. And so right now, with an inspector that comes in and grabs a sample, you don't know what's going on with that milk. You don't know what results are going to be a week later when they come back. What I want is the farmers have control over their testing. The state can come and test all they want. That's fine. But I don't want farmers to be surprised by the results of those tests. I want them to be able to have their own on-farm lab. And we have 50 on-farm labs operating already in the United States at the Raw Milk Institute. We've trained farmers, and we trained over 1,000 farmers. But we've got 50 farmers actually certified, and they have their on-farm lab. So they know whether their practices are sanitary or not. Literally, they can do the test for $2 and get the results in 18 hours instead of waiting for 6 days and paying $100. So, and we don't want the farmers to be surprised by state regulators that may come do testing. So 3 things: high standards for human grade raw milk, farmer training and certification so they know what they're doing and support for them. And 3, the farmer can do their own testing so that they know what's going on to be compliant with those standards and training. So those are the 3 major things. There's lots more things, like I think we need to have insurance reform so the USDA can provide whole food insurance to the lettuce growers, the raw milk producers, all the farmers that produce raw, unprocessed foods that get beat up so hard when illnesses occur. Why do they occur? Because they compromised immune systems. So the only way to get back to a better immune system is to build back the biodiversity. So we need to have better insurance that's actually backed by the USDA. Like right now, they have rain and hail insurance. They have all kinds of insurance policies at the USDA. Want to provide insurance for farmers that are doing qualified, good work, using they're certified by the RMO, so they're very, very low risk, but provide them an opportunity to access very good quality insurance at a low cost. That will keep the cost down for the consumers and access to the consumers, which is so important. I also think there needs to be liability caps. You should not be able to get $1 million for diarrhea for 3 days. That's just not appropriate. So there should be liability caps, because right now there's a whole industry on going after farmers and their insurance companies, driving up rates like crazy to collect millions and millions of dollars to people that have compromised immune systems that were trying to build back their immune system. They got sick for a few days and nobody died. So there's got to be some real work on this. The Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act needs to be changed so you can have food as medicine claims. Food as medicine is really, really important. Right now, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act does not allow any kind of mention as food as medicine, because any mention of a food as a medicine makes you a drug maker. And when you're a drug maker and you don't have authorization from the FDA, you go to jail. So we have to change the entire culture of health to be embracing food, whole food, and the gut microbiome and inflammation and chronic disease versus taking another freaking pill. So that's the crux of what I'm proposing. There's a lot more to it. It's 8 pages with a 2-page executive summary, but that's the crux of it. There's a wonderful history for raw milk in America. It goes back to 1893. It's called the Certified Raw Milk. It was the American Association of Medical Milk Commissions. And they didn't have hardly any problems at all for 100 years, from 1893 to 1999, 106 years. And the last farm to be certified was Altadena Dairy in Los Angeles. So there's a tremendous tradition we could build upon at the RMO, and then use the modern technologies that we have now that we never had in the last 100 years. The new testing technologies with PCR and other things, ELISA tests, to know what's going on in the milk quickly and rapidly and inexpensively. So I think there's a bright, beautiful future coming on, and I think it'd be led by the raw milk ordinance at the FDA, and to be a farmer-friendly, supportive, educational, positive, good leadership for making better health for Americans.
I love that. Going back to mentioning from 1893 to 1996, what happened in 96 to where that changed?
Well, Altadena was in Los Angeles, and their land was worth millions and millions of dollars. And they sold their land, they sold their dairy operations to Dean's Foods, and then off to like realtors to build houses. And the Stubbe brothers were getting old in their age, and the young generation had all this money. So what they did was they took that money and they went and they built their own little operations up in Northern California to kind of get away from it all. Because they'd been beaten up pretty hard by the FDA back in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s anyway, because they were pioneers. And I give them incredible support and encouragement and thanks for all the work they did to keep raw milk laws in California legal. So now we can actually sell raw milk in California. Because in many states, raw milk laws were changed back in the 70s and 80s to prohibit raw milk, but the Stubbies stayed in there. They were guardians at the gate to make sure that raw milk laws stayed intact and were always improved and getting better. They used the AAMMC laws, the American Association of Medical Milk Commissions laws, which were very progressive and met and exceeded pasteurized milk standards without pasteurization. So very clean raw milk that was tested. And we're carrying on that lineage now, but we're using additional layers of technology that was not available back in the 80s and 90s and 70s or before to make it even safer than before. Remember that 82 people have died from pasteurized dairy products in the last 35 years. And I can't count one person that's died from raw milk. There may have been 2 deaths from listeria from imported illegal Mexican cheeses. But other than that, there's been no American raw milk deaths from any commercial operator that I'm familiar with. The CDC doesn't have any at all. So there's been a tremendous bias and suppression of the truth. And it's a favor to industry and big dairy processors that want to have cheap milk. Cheap milk. So at this point, it's a battle.
You bring up a great point on the fact that we're in modern day. We have such advancement technology for all of this, from sanitation to all of the different softwares that could be used for all this. Because that's what's always so funny, but not funny when we talk about raw milk and why pasteurization happened in the first place back in the 1800s. Because people always talk about, oh, people were dying like crazy in the big cities, which was technically true, but they don't talk about the context of it all. The fact that there's horse and buggy, so there's little horse shit everywhere on the streets, so that just bred diseases. There was no sanitation, and then the whole whiskey distilleries and selling the swill milk and all of that, and that's never talked about. So of course, that's way different than where we're at now, and it's infuriating, but also, like you've also mentioned, I just see a lot of more people waking up to all of this and realizing how much they have been lied to on all of this.
Well, the AAMMC certified raw milk from Dr. Henry Coit started in 1893, 130 years ago, was used at the Mayo Clinic. It was on the Titanic. It was served at the White House. It was delicious. It was fantastic. It was tested. It was phenomenal food, but it was expensive. And the processors could not enjoy profits from it. The processors couldn't exploit the farmer. And so processors gathered a lot of power when they said, oh, standards don't matter. We'll take whatever you've got. We'll pay you for it. And initially the payment was okay, but it got less and less over time, where now farmers were losing 5.5 farmers a day in America that are dairymen because the prices of milk to be processed is so low. And that's because there's no value added to the farmer. The bigger the farm, the better. The muddier, who cares? Because it's going to all be pasteurized. So we're getting back to the value added for the farmer and their consumer. And whenever you take money away from an institution like big dairy industry, they get really pissed off. And they don't like losing market share. But they've been losing market share for 40 years, 50 years. And especially from 1990s on forward, when people started recognizing the value of raw milk and started embracing it. So now we have an entire raw milk marketplace. And in some states, it's very well developed. So the cat is out of the bag. The genie's out of the bottle. People know what raw milk is all about using modern standards. And it doesn't matter what the FDA says. It doesn't matter what the naysayer said because their own personal experience tells them otherwise. So the lies are becoming kind of a reaction point where those that lie, people can see they're lying. And they recognize that joke's on you, buddy, not me, because I recognize the true value of raw milk and fantastic gut microbiome changes that occur and the inflammation and all that stuff, which changes and improves. And, there's nothing like a mom that knows the truth. She's going to go after it and ignore all the liars. And that's exactly what's going on right now.
Well, that's why I always comment we're tired of being sold with the dollar sign as the S lies, because that's all it's been. Going back to, because there's two other good points, going to the economics of this, because this is another thing that I notice from folks that just comment all the time is just the price point of trying to buy raw milk. But then also for depending where you're at, you're gonna have to drive 30 minutes to an hour. And so I would love to just talk more on why raw milk is typically much more expensive than saying buying pasteurized dairy.
Let's talk about that. In 1969, the Ford truck cost $3,900. Today, that Ford truck costs $50,000 to $70,000, depending on which one you want to get. The milk, the value that was to the farmer was about 50 to 60 cents a gallon. That's what the farmer got on the farm for that milk to be sold off to be pasteurized. Today, the farmer's getting $2 a gallon. So it went from 50 cents to $2. That's fourfold value change. That truck would only cost about $13,000 to $14,000 today. If you're looking at the price and value of milk in 1969, it would be less than $14,000, $12,000 to $13,000, something like that. That Ford truck cost 6 times that much or 5 times that much. So when you look at raw milk at $12 to $14 a gallon or $15 a gallon, it's really in line with what that Ford truck costs today. It's actually cheaper. It would be the truck equivalent of about $40,000 or $35,000. So what you're doing is you're saying that you're truly aligning the value of that milk with today's economy. So it's not overpriced. It's priced sustainably to support the farm. Because that's why we're losing 5.5 dairies a day, is because the price is below cost of production. It needs to be up much higher than that. The only reason some of these farms can exist is because they're milking 15 to 20,000 cows in one spot. Extremely efficient. And some of those dairies have sweetheart contracts with processors, which give them a little bit more money than others. So gone are the small dairies. Gone are the small dairies, or they're highly supplemented with outside income because they don't exist by themselves. They're not sustainable. Even the organic dairies have collapsed because of the cheating going on at corporate organic dairies. So what this does is it breathes it's a breath of fresh air into the vitality of a renaissance, literally a renaissance. I love that word, regenaissance, of small dairies, smaller dairies. They're serving people, humanity versus processor. And the dairyman can set his own prices because he knows what he needs to serve people and do it well. And so he can set his own prices instead of being told by a processor what he has to charge. He could set his own prices. Most dairymen are very, very reluctant when they're selling raw milk to people to raise their prices because they understand the impact of those price changes on people that they dearly love and care for because they're their consumers, right? The consumers support the dairyman. So I haven't seen gouging at all on raw milk pricing at all at the farm level. I've seen some gouging at the store level when raw milk is provided to stores. Sometimes the stores take too much. They shouldn't, but sometimes they do. So I'm hoping there's more raw milk production going on. There's better access to retail stores. There's better access to farmers markets and local venues to sell raw milk and get that connection back to the consumer because it's such a wonderful food. But the price of raw milk, yes, it's much higher because it costs more to produce it. You can't have one milker in the barn milking 800 cows automatically with machines with a bunch of robots. You have to put 4 people in the milk barn to make sure that every udder is clean, super, super clean. And that the milk is chilled rapidly at down to 35 degrees in just literally minutes versus down to 50 degrees in 2 hours. So there's different technologies. Testing costs more money. You have to also worry about insurance. Insurance costs a fortune. When you have a dairy, you literally don't need to have insurance if you're going to serve the processor. The processor takes care of all the liability by processing. But when you're a raw milk producer, if you go into the store, that insurance is extremely expensive. It costs our dairy $500,000 a year for insurance to go to a store. So you can see the challenges here, but the economics of sustainable dairying is so different than pasteurized dairy.
Well, this is why I have the podcast and why I'm glad that you're on here, because the prices of just food are just so all over the place. I mean, it's the same with apparel, because I get these comments all the time. Why does a t-shirt that costs $40, but then the whole apparel industry is completely jacked up and the prices are completely inflated because like for example, Nike, they have just cheap polyester shirts for $20. And so when you actually talk about the economics of that and break it down, it's just because people aren't aware of the true value of what you're saying too. And
I think we need to brace ourselves for food prices to go very high.
yep.
When you put tariffs on imports, and so much of our imported products are food from Mexico, where labor is cheaper and it's a little warmer down there, so we can grow longer seasons. I fly to Mexico quite a bit to do medical clinic work down there. And all through the state of Sinaloa, near Hermosillo, near Guaymas, that area, tens and tens of thousands of acres of vegetables that are brought to America. That's how we get our organic berries. That's how we get our organic tomatoes and lettuce and everything from greenhouses down in Mexico. Many of those companies are actually owned by American corporations. Some are Mexican. But the bottom line is that food comes into America, and if we have a 25% tariff on that, you can see what's going on. And it's going to be the American consumer that has to pay that tariff at the store. So again, I think there's some short-sighted policy here that really doesn't understand the impact of how we trade with other countries to provide for nutrition in America. Now, that also increases a tremendous opportunity for American farmers to do well as well. However, many of these foods are not produced in America because the costs are so much higher because we don't have the labor base. So there's a very complex set of situations going on here where I think there are a lot of farmers that maybe voted one way during the election are very concerned about the impact on their labor force as well as others. So I would ask for some grace here to try to calm the nerves a little bit and go forward with some objective, practical solutions to the challenges we have, and not do too crazy, get too crazy too quick.
No, I agree. I mean, back when I asked how you're feeling these next 4 years, because I feel very optimistic, but it's also going to be very painful. And I don't think folks really realize that. Because even, for example, this is a side note, I saw Steak and Shake made the announcement that they're going to start using tallow. And then I saw someone go to Buffalo Wild Wings because they use tallow for their wings. And he just kept chirping at them, asking more and more about their tallow they used. And then he finally got a picture of the ingredients on it, and I forgot the name of some other things, but then he was just appalled, and then he left. And he does not understand that our cattle inventory is the lowest in 73 years. A lot of that's not grass-fed finished. And if we were to completely just revamp all of this and start supplying tallow, if you want grass-fed finished, well, that's going to be another 2 years you have to wait if we want to bring in all this new cattle inventory. And so that's just one example of the thousands we could be talking about just in agriculture.
Yeah, I think
So that's
that when you import so much of your beef from South America, again, a 25% tariff would be imposed on that. So you're going to see a huge wake-up call here. And it's my hope that we can have constructive change where we can get constructive change and then modify some of this really early, premature, reactionary stuff that's just not making any sense at this point. So that's what I would really strongly recommend is take a pause and chill a little bit because it's kind of radical.
Yeah, going back to the food is medicine, because that is really important moving forward. I mean, food is meant to nourish and heal us. The funny thing with food and raw milk is that it makes us sick, but then it's been so normalized, like Thanksgiving, for example, it's so normalized so you're just going to gorge yourself to where you're just going to sit on your ass for 4 hours afterwards and probably fall asleep. That's not normal or okay. Food is meant to fuel us, but then also repair us and heal us. And that's why raw milk is so incredible. So I'd love to actually talk about the components of raw milk versus pasteurized. As more people are starting to wake up, I think this would be good to talk. Yeah, the actual aspects of raw milk that makes it so beneficial versus pasteurized.
The FDA and all of their PhD representatives that work at these land grant colleges and universities that get money from the FDA, money from the NIH to do research to pursue FDA goals. These PhDs, these FDA workers, lie to the American public by saying this: there is no difference. They're similar between pasteurized milk and raw milk on a nutritional basis. They say the nutrition is the same between pasteurized and raw milk, and there's nothing lost. That is a lie, an absolute lie. And let me tell you why and how that's a lie. In 2021, Dr. Lin at Cornell University and a bunch of other researchers together, funded by the National Dairy Council, did a study called Bioactives Found in Unprocessed Milk. It was published on December 8th, 2021. And it went on to say that consumers are demanding whole food nutrition to boost their immune systems post-COVID. So in raw milk, in unprocessed milk, are all these wonderful bioactives. These bioactives are inactivated and destroyed by pasteurization. We want to go into unprocessed milk and extract those bioactives and make a new patented pill, potion, or food that has all of these benefits. And let me recite the benefits. Here they are. Anti-hypertensive. Keep your blood pressure down. Anti-tumor. Wow. Anti-inflammatory. Remember that chronic disease is driven by chronic inflammation. So anti-inflammatory effects. Antimicrobial. Raw milk has a protective effect on some pathogens which don't want to grow when you have raw milk. Antivirus. Think COVID. Think bird flu. Think cold. Think influenza. Think the flu. Antivirus effects. Anti-carcinogenic effects. Wow. Decreasing cancer. Isn't that one of our big epidemics we have in America is cancer? Immunoregulatory. It keeps your immune system in balance. It regulates your immune system. It doesn't let it get supercharged. It keeps it in balance. Probiotic, prebiotic, and postbiotic effects. Remineralization, and modularization of the digestive process and metabolism. That's the short list of the bioactive effects that are destroyed in pasteurization. So it is a fraud. It is a bias. It is a lie. It is misleading to say that raw milk and pasteurized milk are same nutritionally. Nutrition is the bioactive components as well as the level of fat, the level of sugar, the level of protein. Who do we care about how much we have of protein and fats if it's not bioavailable and the bioactives are missing? So I tell you, it's really something because these are the things that actually make your gut microbiome work properly. And they have for the last 15,000 years of mankind drinking raw milk. And in fact, the researchers say that these bioactives have brought a competitive advantage to those that had raw milk in evolutionary terms. So the cat's out of the bag, genie's out of the bottle. The studies done at Cornell University that are posted at the FDA say it. But yet the FDA continues to say there is no difference, there is no difference. Their website's packed with all those lies. It's not true at all. And so that's why you and I and others have to be teachers. We have to bring forth the truth, be honest. We have to tell the truth to everyone and let the data, the research, and the human experience speak for itself instead of just putting in these lies to try to somehow suppress raw milk and not accept new standards for raw milk, new testing for raw milk, the bioactives found in raw milk, the whole global picture of what's going on is really, really important.
My final question then, with that being said, for folks that might be of interest to start their own dairy or even just get one dairy cow, how should they go about that?
I would go to the Raw Milk Institute and become an expert. I would go to rawmilkinstitute.org and I would read everything on that website. If you read everything on that website, every research article, how to do raw milk, how to look for biofilms, how to take care of the cow, everything you'd ever want to know about raw milk, you become a de facto good student expert. And that will give you a really good pathway to the journey of having your own cow, which is not easy, not cheap, all hard work, or starting a little raw milk dairy, or how to support your local raw milk dairy. So all those things, I would go to rawmilkinstitute.org and just look at the data, look at the research, look at the science, study, work hard, go back to school, because it takes that learning to become good enough to do what we're talking about here. That's what I would strongly recommend.
Well, that's what I love too. Is you're so focused. This is another funny point. Is you are so focused on quality care, sanitation, knowledge of the history, and it's just it completely goes against what we've been told about by the FDA and USDA for such a long time, and that's why knowledge is power. And I mean that's why I have this. So thank you again for joining, Mark.
You're very welcome, and let's do this again in 6 months, because if I get that job at the FDA, I'm sure we're going to have a lot to share.
Absolutely.
Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.